Good afternoon. Welcome to the Business Boardcast. I'm Nikki Larkin, your host, and with me today is Nigel Elks. Welcome, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Hello, everyone.
So today, what we're talking about is how to make the cuts. So we're talking about succession planning. We're talking about exiting of businesses. And we're talking about why only 1 in 5 businesses are actually ready to sell when they come and speak to us. So actually, the amount of businesses that are ready to sell, aren't ready to sell, is even higher than 4 and 5. But when we still get a lot of people come to us that think they're about selling, but even at the stage when they're thinking about selling, 4 and 5 are not ready. So we're going to talk today on the positives of the 1 in 5, of why they do look good and are ready to sell. As always, just a bit of housekeeping. Please do post your questions and comments. Say hi to us so that we know that the technology is working. It's always good to know. And we will answer your questions along the way. So we've got quite a few different things we're going to go through. So where should we start? What's the first one that you've got on your list, Nigel, of why a business is ready to sell?
Sure. Well, as probably some of us will know, the list is fairly comprehensive, and what we'll probably sort of touch on are some of the points on a high level. And I think a lot of it is, if you stand back and look at your business, really it's got to kind of be ring fenced in its own right and sort of run in isolation. So if we picture that, so the first point I'd probably say is be a well documented business, a well run and documented business. So at each stage there's a to-do manual for the business. So if anybody is off sick or needs to sort of pick up a certain role or know how something's done within the whole organization, that's kind of covered off. And some of you may sort of have ISO accreditations, things like that, and obviously with having those, it's essential that you have these processes documented. So I'd probably say that's one of the first ones to sort of implement and try and do and just make sure is within the business.
Absolutely. So really good processes and procedures so that if anybody's away, the business doesn't go belly up.
Exactly. I think
next one.
The next one I'd probably say in line with that is basically the accounts, and to have accounts that are well run. And by that I mean not with lifestyle expenses within them. So any buyer can rely on the numbers, and if you're doing regular management accounts, be it monthly or quarterly, it shows good practice. And when people have good accounts that the figures are transparent and buyers see that, it kind of it alleviates any of the sort of uncertainty and gives confidence to any buyers, and promotes good practice, and it just shows a well-run business. So when we're sort of supplying accounts, if they are tidy, well run, up to date, and where people do management accounts, it just shows it's a well run organization. I suppose
sorry, go on. Add in there, it really does help when we get to the actual sales process with the management accounts, because that process often does take a few months. So often the buyer wants to see the latest numbers as you go along. So if you've already got that process there of having regular accounts being prepared and that they're accurate, it gives a lot of confidence to the buyer during the sales process. And some buyers can get cold feet if they're having to take 2 to 3 months to get the latest set of information all the time, because they just think, oh, that's really not good.
That's right. And I think also to echo that, this also helps the price. It helps all the sort of negotiation and the confidence, as you rightly said, Nikki, that the buyer's got within the seller. So it helps all round. I'd probably say, there isn't one point that is key. They're all key to make up the right mix, but it's having transparent numbers and good figures that can be relied upon it's got to be up there in the top three, if not number one, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So I think next, which sometimes can be got round, but when we're looking to ring fence a business, it kind of, within the fence, it doesn't want to include the owner, because obviously the owner isn't going with the business unless there's some exceptional circumstances or there is a transition or other reasons. But generally, certainly if the owner's of an age, or like my age, they would then be looking to exit the business. So the more the business isn't reliant on the owner, holding customer relationships, doing all the reviews, doing the managing director's role as well as sales director, etc., the better. He kind of needs to be away from it with people in those roles in an ideal world. And I'd probably say this is in priority order. This would be a couple of rungs down the ladder, which, some buyers may have MDs in the waiting who can then come in and they're ready for the challenge. And then there's a transition of 6 months and it's done. So I wouldn't say this is a must-have one, but it's what a lot of businesses do look for in isolation. So certainly if it's private equity where they're just putting somebody on the board or something like that, then they would look to just have the continuity of the team that's at the table, so to speak, and in the organisation. So yeah, anything to add there, Nikki?
No, all good. And
I think that the next one is really always seeing what the split of clients is, and more particularly to ensure that there isn't a high concentration within one client, and obviously the risk that may happen if that client was lost for any reason. Now, I probably wouldn't say if you've got a client that is 50% of your business, I wouldn't say, well, no, you know, immediately try and reduce that. You don't, where the business is, you carry on, your business. And there's companies we've dealt with where they've had those clients for 10, 20 years, a good relationship. And that's a great springboard, but it is a big red flag for a lot of buyers. And we'll see it, even if they're a blue chip client, we will see the sort of red flag raised, and certainly a lot of private equity would take a step back, as would trade buyers. So it's something to be aware of and then work towards. And also what all this is about is maximizing the price of your business. And if you've got that high concentration of a client, unfortunately, buyers will discount that into offers that they make to then reduce it down to a sensible level, and not at a higher percentage.
absolutely, yeah. Either they're going to discount or they'll just ignore the opportunity entirely. They just think it's too risky.
Yeah, it often depends on somebody's motivation to buy a company, and some of it may be the team within the organisation, or there may be the knowledge may be a great diversification for the purchaser. So sometimes there's other reasons, but if it's somebody in the same trade or a private equity buyer, then it would be a red flag and it would be discounted accordingly.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've been through 4. So just summarize before we have the final 2. So we've been through the good ones that are ready for sale. They've got good processes and procedures. They've got good management accounts with good financial data. They're not reliant upon the owner, and their concentration of their clients is nicely spread. So we've got a couple others to do.
I think the next one is obviously what somebody would, and they go hand in hand. So I think in our prep work we might have, I may be mixing these up, Nikki. So the first one is the pipeline of
Yes,
the
that one.
business.
And then we've got one more after that. I'll give you a hint to that one next. Yes,
Um,
pipeline. Yeah,
and obviously what any buyer is purchasing is basically the future opportunity. They want the potential of a robust income stream that is then going to carry on, they can add to, and they can increase, and that's what they're buying. So and within different sectors, these come in all shapes and sizes. Some may be contractual and can contract for a certain time, and those are sort of maybe on auto renewing, maybe a set line in the sand that it's a certain date that it's then renewed on. Others would just be the longevity of the relationships that they've had with their clients, and so it's again with the in line with the client concentration. When you break it down, it's looking at the profile of the customers and also when they're likely to be doing their next orders or want their next sort of when they're doing their next business with you. So it's paramount, and obviously anybody buying a business wants to know it's as future proof as it can be, and the finance house behind them will be drilling down and also asking the same questions. So it's essential that the sort of a business has a strong pipeline, and I think where businesses don't have that, unless they're a sort of extremely strong brand, or the mechanism in which they do their marketing and advertising creates leads and new business and everything, and that's a proven successful mechanism. Obviously there wouldn't be as many buyers for businesses if they haven't got those in place.
Absolutely. So the final one that we've got, it was the attractive financials to the buyer. So you have to have the underlying numbers to make it worthwhile purchase.
Yeah, I think I think that's imperative, and the best, and it's obviously probably slightly obvious or common sense, but people again are buying that opportunity. They want to see a profitable business. They want to sort of have the opportunity to then grow it, and depending on the sector and what the run rate is for the sector, a strong profitable business gets the maximizes the price obviously for the seller. And I think equally on the other side of the coin, and some and not that we really get involved at all with these, Nikki, but where the businesses are stressed and that there's a negative side to the business, it obviously people just buy maybe the asset value, the machines, something like that, and it's not obviously the best time to sort of sell the business and work through. But depending on a company's situation, and we'd obviously always talk through individual scenarios with any sellers, but where it is stressed, it's very difficult, and in the end sometimes doesn't result in a sale. What we want for the seller and for ourselves and for everybody is trying to sell something whereby there's an exponential opportunity for the buyer, so they can then grow it, and also it means the seller will maximize what they get. I mean, it's an obvious point, but it has to be good financials, and a well-run business to maximise the price.
Absolutely. So we've I'll summarise those 6 things in a moment, but we've had a question come in from Bonnie. Interesting question. So, hi both. I'd be interested to hear how you think buyers approach framework agreements. We often have clients who are forced to supply, particularly public sector customers, via framework agreements and not much outside. On the one hand, framework agreement equals fairly reliable income for a set period. On the other, once the term expires, they're limited routes to market, so it's a lot of eggs in one basket. So I'll take this one because I've had a few clients where I have had exposure to this. So I suppose there's probably a couple of different scenarios, Bonnie. There's some businesses that have only got a couple of framework agreements and they don't have a lot outside. And yes, so that really does limit their value, because it will be looking at how long are those framework agreements. And also in framework agreements doesn't also always guarantee that revenue. It just means that you're in the mix to be picked, to be picked. So what it probably therefore limits the multiple and the valuation. So it doesn't stop it being attractive, because there will be other businesses that will be extremely excited to get to be on a framework agreement, because they may have other things that they can sell through it and things like. Where it works well though is where it's a so it might be, say for example, a care provider that does provide services to lots of different local authorities, so they're on framework agreements for perhaps Oxfordshire, West Berkshire, Reading Council, all sorts of things. And again, that's about looking at what the buyer will be looking at is, one, the length of the framework, because do they have to renew it every 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, however long it is. They will also looking very closely at the terms of the framework. So as you'll know, some of those frameworks will be pitching you at that same amount the entire time. Other ones will have, say, inflationary increases or set increases. So, for example, we've got somebody in our group is a trustee of a very large charity, and they have a framework agreement with a local council, and they've actually had to step away from it because and actually cancel their contract because the framework agreement didn't cater for increases of national insurance and the national minimum wage. And so with the recent increases, that has now made that contract uneconomic for them. So there will be a lot of scrutiny of what those look like. So there's lots of things to look at. So they'll be looked at, the framework agreements quite honestly will be looked at just as closely as the biggest supplier, biggest client contracts. So it doesn't stop them being sellable, but it usually means it's more of a specialist buyer that understands them, that will be interested.
I think also to add there, Nikki, the benefit of being on some of these framework, if there's sort of if it's quite challenging to get on them, is a massive selling point for a business, and often that can really help a scenario. We kind of have to make sure we're not a subcontractor to somebody else who's on the framework, obviously being transparent about the whole agreement. And equally, it's looking at the terms and conditions of these agreements to ensure if a business isn't sold, that then they have the opportunity to review it or whatever. So it's also just being transparent with everything that's involved with it. And generally, we would include that in our sort of profile, so that it was a clear message of everything that was involved and how it was structured. So it's showing everything as it is. But I think depending on the scenario, it can be very positive. But as you rightly say, Nikki, it depends on that, looking at the sort of point on the client concentration, how much of it is that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just going to rerun through the 6 points, just in case anyone's just caught us in at the end point, and then Nigel's going to wrap up with the top 3 tips, so that you will make the cut and be in the attractive business to be told. So the top 6 things were processes and procedures, management accounts, i.e. good financial data, not reliant upon the owner, attractive financials to the buyer, so it needs to be profitable and there needs to be substance to the numbers. A good not a high concentration spread, but it nervously spread across a lot of clients, and a strong business pipeline. So what are the takeaway top 3 tips, Nigel?
Well, again, it's very difficult to pick 3. There's a lot of elements to consider, or potential tips and where to start, but I always think that the starting point is, and again, it's age dependent really, but is your business worth more to you by running it than actually selling it? So what I mean by that is, if you think what you're taking out of the business, and if you're then looking for another career or something like that, you've got to think, where would I replicate that income? And often it's extremely difficult when you built up a business over a number of years, got to a stage where you're having those sort of thoughts about selling your business, but if you need to carry on working or want to carry on working and keep busy, it would be hard to replicate probably what you're earning then if you're starting something from scratch, or unless you have a particular angle from it. So I'd probably say that's the first sort of consideration really. I think the second one, the obvious point is really what we've said in all those points and during this presentation, is really to list out those, probably try and see where they do some gap analysis, see what needs an action, and really it's just to make sure that if you shut your business at 4 o'clock and you'd sold it and somebody had the keys, could somebody come in at 9 o'clock Monday morning, open up and be able to run your business? And that's kind of the simplistic view to probably try and get to, where you can and where's practical for the size of your business.
And to be fair, even if you're not looking at a sales exit, it's still good to be thinking from that point of view, because what if you are incapacitated, or if you have to suddenly go and care for somebody else or something? It is good to be thinking about that to make sure that you're still going to have an income and it's not going to seize up if you can't be doing stuff in the business.
I think generally also, to add to that, all those points that we've gone through will help you run your business better. And whatever your size, you'll be running your business as a larger organization with all those good practices in place that will hopefully give you more transparency and more focus on areas to sort of put right. So the final one really is to put yourself in the buyer's shoes. You know your industry, you know your sector. Would you buy your business? And I think that's often a question we'd sort of cover off. And really it's to, again, drill down on the points for the reasons maybe why you wouldn't. And it's an honest question to yourself, and sometimes not probably one to share, but that's the question to sort of then analyze and then put right what isn't. And some of it may be just working practices and things like that. But yeah, they're the 3 tips. There are loads more, and which would come out in any sort of conversations, and it depends on somebody's circumstances. This is obviously a general fit, but yeah, hopefully it's of some use. And we've sort of covered enough detail on them as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nigel. So great tips there. Lots of good things to be thinking about to make sure that you are sales worthy. And of course, please do, if you are thinking about selling, whether it's today or in a few years' time, do get in touch with Nigel or myself, and we'd be very delighted to have a confidential conversation regarding your business and see if you are hitting the mark and are sales worthy at the moment. So thank you so much. I think my next one is in 2 weeks, and I have a AI expert coming to give us an intro with what is going on in the world of AI and what people are using in their businesses, already adapting. So there's a lot of adoption of various AI things at the moment. So we're having a little run through of that, and it's a good one because the lady, sorry, the name escapes, Emma, I can't think of her surname, but Emma's coming. She's going to be going, she's the one that's actually running the mini MBA AI course for the Berkshire Growth Hub. There is, it might not still be too late to book on that because that starts in May. But there's also a session in September. But anyway, we'll hear lots more about it next time. Thank you so much, Nigel. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.